Garrett is an authentic and dynamic leader within the higher education industry. After several years of administrative experience, she is recognized as an organizational leader and mentor to new talent, those needing a change, and in elevating the talents of others. Her extensive experience in corporate businesses, ground and distance learning environments, and nonprofit organizations complement her successes in startup functions, corrective operations, as well as elevating established systems. She believes we all have a journey to explore, stories to create, and the wisdom to share with each other about experiences.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Shana. You can go ahead with your presentation. Thank you. Good luck.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So let me go ahead and share with you my screen, if that's okay. And if somebody will just confirm for me that you can see the slides, that would be great. Can you see the slides? I think so, right? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, bonjour. My name is Dr. Shanna Garrett, and it's an absolute thrill to be here today to speak with you about something that I am incredibly excited about and I feel very passionate about, and that's authentic leadership. And so today's session is called Pure Heart Leadership and an authentic approach to leadership. And so, what I wanted to share with you in the time that we have together is a philosophy regarding authentic leadership and really how it is a unique experience or opportunity for women to bring forward their strengths within our professional lives. So, the reason that I focused on this particular topic, and I've been focused on leadership for quite some time, is because the previous forms of leadership really were a bit of a challenge, right? And there's a lot of research out there, and I think we're all very familiar with knowing that people don't necessarily quit a job. They quit because of the boss. They quit because of the manager. And so throughout my presentation, you're going to see some research, some numbers that speak to that. And at the very end, I'll give you my contact information. So if you'd like a copy of the presentation, or if you'd like to start a dialogue or have conversation, I'm so open to having those conversations with you so that we really come together as a community and strengthen each other. And so with that, today, what I'm going to cover is leadership foundations of pure heart leadership, different strategies to develop at different levels within our teams and organizations. There's a bit of a mindful approach that comes in with pure heart leadership. And we're also going to talk about a little bit of team collaboration. So the reason that I really focused on leadership is that it's not just about how we're connecting with each other, but there's really a cost impact to our various organizations. And so some of the most interesting research that I found when it came to turnover rates for staff within organizations was looking at the level in which the employee is sitting at the organization and what the cost is to the organization should they need to replace that individual. So just for example, the cost to an organization to replace an entry-level employee is actually 30 to 50% of their annual salary. And the higher you go up in the chain, the greater that increase becomes to the organization. So a mid-level employee, it's 150% of their annual salary is what it costs to recruit, hire, onboard, and train somebody as a replacement. That's pretty significant. And here in the United States, recent surveys have shown that anywhere from 47 to 50% of Americans would leave their ideal job, even if it meant less pay. And it has to do with leadership. So what exactly is pure heart leadership? I get this question a lot is when I share the title and people look at me and they say, oh, is that all warm and fuzzy? You know, are you going to give me hugs? Things of that nature. That's not where I'm coming from with pure heart. Pure heart means you're coming at it from a pure heart. You're coming at your decision making and your engagement in your interactions without ego. It means doing the right thing for the right reasons, and ultimately, it's helping each other. So you're probably a little bit curious as to where Pure Heart came from. And just to share with you a little bit of my background, I am currently a dean at Walden University. I currently oversee the College of Psychology and Community Services. My education background is clinical psychology, counseling psychology, and I've spent quite a bit of time within higher ed, but also working in nonprofit organizations. And so over the years, I've learned quite a bit, not only from an academic standpoint, but also just watching and learning from various leaders that I've interacted with, supervisors that I had, mentors that I've had. And so for over 20 years, this has been in development and in process. And what I chose for the basis of this leadership approach is really some of the most important tenets that come from Carl Rogers, Albert Bandura, Albert Maslow. There's some authentic leadership components in there, and there's also some mindfulness practices that are encompassed. Again, happy to send you the slides so you don't have to take really furious notes. But if you're not familiar with Carl Rogers, some of the concepts that he shares with us are around self-actualization and what we need to thrive. And it's congruence, which is just a really nice word for being genuine or real. Unconditional positive regard, which is acceptance and caring, and being, empathic to others, being very, having empathy for others. Albert Bandura, one of the most exciting concepts he came up with was social learning theory. And it truly is about if that people will adapt and learn and imitate behavior that they observe and interact with. And when you think about leadership, think about your own organization or your your particular groups that you interact with and see if some of the behaviors and traits of leaders in those organizations, if that doesn't kind of rub off on some of your colleagues and how they behave and how they engage, right? We learn from watching others. And then when we see that reinforced, then we tend to repeat the behavior if we're getting positive reinforcement. And if we're getting a negative reinforcement, we probably won't do it again because that's not something that we're a fan of at times. But for Albert Bandura, it's definitely social learning theory. And then Maslow. I think most of us have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If not, it's here on the slide. Again, happy to send you the slides. But Maslow's basic premise is that we have needs. And in order to move into our different levels, we have to have those needs met. So if you think about having your needs met in a professional setting and your engagement with either the deliverables, the skills and talents of your job, as well as leadership and reinforcement, you can see how those needs are important in order for us to feel complete, whole, satisfied, and then turning that into performance and productivity. I also included one of my favorite quotes by Maslow because I think it's pretty telling, especially when we've had pretty difficult days at the office and we're running around doing a lot, right? So those are the psych tenets. Now let me talk to you a little bit about authentic leadership, right? And so authentic leadership means that we extend ourselves to be aware, connect, and support each other, right? Whether that's through organizational goals, whether it's creating relationships in personal and professional development. And it's about being authentic. It's about being vulnerable, having integrity, being transparent, being engaged, being receptive, being an effective communicator. All those things come into play when you talk about authentic relationship, because at the end of the day, you are bringing yourself to the workplace. All the great traits, the qualities, the experiences, the perspectives, the values, the beliefs, that all comes together and it presents in your leadership approach. So the last component is mindfulness. And if you're familiar with mindfulness, fantastic. If you're not, let me just share with you a couple of key factors in mindfulness. And one of them is the ability to connect with yourself and others, as well as a larger community. It's also about being able to initiate change and uh, guide through communicating the change, explaining the change, but also having the credibility to embrace the change. Okay. And there is a real strength in mindfulness that it applies to focus, clarity, creativity, and compassion. Now, the challenge with being mindful is there are some hindrances, right? That it's difficult to move forward, it's difficult to navigate with clarity, focus, and creativity if we're attached to particular beliefs, um, if we're attached to processes that no longer really serve us, right? If we have an aversion to change, if we stay in a state of confusion or delusion, or just choosing not to see facts or data, right? If we sit in a place of envy and jealousy, right? If we're sitting in a prideful position, right? Mindfulness has more of a flow to it. There's not as much ego with it, right? You're going with the change, you're moving along with whatever those particulars are. So at this point, we've gone over the psychology, we've talked about authentic, we've talked a little bit about mindfulness. Let me talk to you and share with you how this goes into creating effective relationships, because at the core of what we do, it really comes down to relationships. And so I thought what would be helpful is to kind of give some examples, maybe a little bit of a roadmap of how you can create these effective relationships, and then tell you a little bit about the benefits of how this works. So, if you are a leader, a manager, supervisor, and you have a team, make sure that you're setting strategic goals, not only for yourself, but for your team. Build upon the strengths of your team. Know the strengths of the individual players on your team. This helps you to not only know where the strengths of your team lie, but it also gives you an idea of where your gaps and your opportunities are. I'll give you an example. Um, my gap really has to do with any type of really elevated pivot tables, charts, doing kind of statistics in Excel, that type of thing. That is not my strong suit, not at all. So I know for a fact that somebody on my team is completely gifted in that area. So when a project comes through or something comes along that I'm not able to figure it out, then I go to my teammate and I say, "Hey, can you help me out with this? It's not my strong suit." And conversely, on my team, folks know what some of my strengths are. And so if they're having a bit of a challenge in an area, we share responsibilities back and forth, or we definitely share ideas and we help each other out, right? But you have to know the strengths and the gaps on your team in order to do that. Recognize when you need external support, know what you need for the positions, and know when your team can shift to support. One of the other great takeaways that I've learned and wanted to pass on is look beyond your immediate team for support and resources. One of the things that I work with on my team, it's a concept called a work swarm. If you're not familiar with it, um, I hope by my excitement you'll go and look it up after the fact. After the conference is something you might want to do with your team. But a work swarm is a fantastic way to bring a quick group of folks together to discuss a problem, but then to brainstorm and try to solve the problem. And then once you have your collective ideas from which to then decide which approach you're going to take, the group disbands. And the beauty in that is that everybody comes together very quickly. They know what the issue is. They propose different ideas, and then you have your resolution. I highly recommend them. They're fantastic. They're a fantastic way to bring everybody together to problem solve. It's a creative approach. It's not just another meeting, and it kind of breaks up the day-to-day routines. Skip levels. If you are not familiar with skip levels, that is when a supervisor they skip their direct reports and go to the other individual's direct reports, and they do a skip level. It can be a positive way to ensure that messages, directives, there's effective communication going on, that the deliverables and the goals are very clearly aligned throughout the organization, or at least that vertical. And it's just a good way to build relationships at various levels of the organization. I also would recommend network interest. There are so many of us that have shared interest and passions and goals, but because we're usually pretty focused on the day-to-day work that we're doing in the deliverables, we don't really get to break out much and get to connect with others about various shared interests. So maybe one of your meetings, or maybe it's a check-in point with your teams. See what they're interested in. Maybe they're interested in something that you're also interested in, and that's something that you can share and build together, right? So just a couple of suggestions there about how to create an effective relationship. Now that's as a team. On an individual level, if you're doing one-on-ones, fantastic. If you're not doing one-on-ones, I highly recommend them. One-on-ones basically means you're meeting with this individual, you're discussing their goals, you're discussing performance, you're giving feedback, you're checking in, engaging with them, how they're feeling about, what they're doing and how they're performing. I have found that one of the best effective ways in connecting with my colleagues, especially those on my team, is that we meet. It's usually, depending on the individual, 30 minutes or an hour. The first 5 minutes, we talk about updates. Then we check in on goals. Then we talk about strengths. We, if they've had a presentation, I definitely give them feedback. My philosophy is, like many others, I praise in public. I give feedback and support in private. We talk about their strengths, if there's any interest, if they're having any challenges, are there any barriers that they need my assistance in helping remove so they can move something forward that they need to deliver on. I also use this opportunity to ask for feedback. I ask them, what can I do for you? How can I best support you? What do you need from me? It's a two-way interaction, right? So that they know that I'm invested in them, but I also value what they're giving me in return in terms of how I can do a better job at whatever I'm working on that particular week. I'm a big fan of compliments as long as they're authentic, and I'm a big fan of feedback as long as it's constructive. Okay. One of my favorite slides, and it's probably one of the more popular slides that I get feedback on, is about what makes a good leader, right? And so you can see there's a lot of character traits there: integrity, setting a good example, being supportive, encouraging. We are a culmination of each interaction, sensation, life experience, both positive and negative. We are human beings, and how we receive information and how we perceive that information, we also have the responsibility to be very mindful about how we communicate that out and how we demonstrate that with our teams. As leaders, we all know, and we probably should be reminded from time to time, that people in our teams do watch what we say and what we do, and does it align with what we say and what we do, right? Another one of my favorite slides, another slide I get a lot of feedback on, is good boss versus bad boss. Take a quick look and see immediately, as you're looking through the good boss list, how many of those do you put a check mark by that you do on a regular basis? Or can you pinpoint a good boss you've had in the past? Probably, right? But then a bad boss, what does a bad boss look like, right? How many of these things do you do? How many of these things have you had done to you, right? So which boss are you? Are you a good boss? Are you a bad boss? Are you a mix of both? Where do you land on that? So in demonstrating pure heart leadership, there have been some significant changes that I've seen, not only in my leadership style, but in the teams that I lead and in the folks that I've mentored, right? And with being authentic and being more in tune with your authentic style, there's a greater level of confidence and belief and advocacy in what you're doing, but also that translates into your team dynamics. You start to learn from the victories and the setbacks. You're building relationships, which, in my opinion, is just as important as completing the tasks. You get to a place of accepting change as a constant variable. And so it's not something that's so earth shattering at times, right? Change is a constant. You're being more intentional with developing your teams at all levels. And there's also an increased level of accountability and expectations. So having this authentic, positive leadership approach, it shows that you're investing in your teams. You're acknowledging their efforts. You're looking for opportunities for them to develop, and then you're rewarding them. You will also find that the more you role model this approach with your team, they start to role model it with their teams as well. They're also becoming transparent. They're also starting to communicate in a similar manner. Um, Going back to social learning theory and Bandura, right? They're going to start to role model the behaviors that you're setting forth, the manner in which you lead, right? They're going to recognize that being authentic and highlighting their strengths and talents is a good thing, right? It makes for honestly, a happier, more positive, dynamic, and creative workplace environment. So here are a couple things that you can do immediately. As a leader, develop your authentic leadership approach. If you don't know what that looks like, I'm happy to share a couple of emails and we'll figure it out for you, right? But if you know what your approach is and what your preferred style is, start to develop that a little bit more. One of the things that I created, it's called a SMART meeting. It's simple, it's mindful, it's authentic, it's realistic, and it's transparent. Okay. Make sure you have strategic and tactical and growth goals. Make sure that you're doing a self assessment as who you are into who you are, but also as who you are as a leader, and invest in your own development. Now, how do you take this application of Pure Heart Leadership and apply it to your team? Get to know your team. Do you know your team? Um, what are their commonalities that you can build upon, right? What deficits do you need to identify? What are those gaps you need to identify so that you can strengthen and make sure that you have coverage in that area? Make sure you're building effective and empowered leaders to do and live their authentic skills and talents. Do they know where they want to go with their career? If they don't, ask them and then work with them to take those steps. And what's their passion? How do they motivate? What are those abilities? As a leader, you should know those components of your team, right? You're getting to know them as individuals. So, the benefits of using Pure Heart Leadership is that you are originating your own authentic leadership legacy. You're building effective and empowered and authentic leaders at each level. You're creating effective and dynamic teams that support your staff and your customers. You're also helping them build their career progression, which is incredibly important, right? It goes back to what we were talking about building relationships. And at its core, you're helping fulfill and engage individuals in not only their professional life, but also in their personal life. So I hope from our quick time together today that you are excited or curious about developing yourself and your style, that you're going to take away from some aspect of this, that you want to start investing in yourself as a means of investing in others. If you need a mentor, find a mentor. Mentors are one of the greatest gifts. And for women, there's it's so incredibly important to build that network and those relationships. And I'd also say, make sure you're following your trends in your industry. Make sure you're showing up for your commitments and that you're following through with those commitments. So this is me. Um, this is my contact information. I would love to connect to talk about anything related to authentic leadership, even if you want to talk higher ed, even if you just want to talk about just the scope of women in leadership and influencing. I'm happy to have those conversations. In fact, I love to have those conversations. And if you want to know more about Pure Heart, I've written a good book, an interesting book. I do share, I probably should have told you at the very outset, for those that are in the United States, I am from Texas, so I have a bit of a witty humor. So I definitely share a lot of leadership stories and leadership examples in the book, in case you would like to know more about that. And however I can be of assistance, and happy to answer any questions that you may have. Just trying to be really mindful of time.
Thank you so much we are so really grateful you took the time of your schedule and shared fantastic information about the leadership. So if you want to contact about the leadership, so please contact Shanna Garrett. So definitely she can help you out. And this is the question from the audience. So so everyone has their unique leadership style, right? So how do you describe your own leadership style?
Gosh, I think great question. I would say it's probably more transformational. Um, that's a good question. I think it's transformational and servant leadership. For me, um, I am much more about building my team and being of service than chasing titles. So transformational, definitely servant.
Mhm. Okay.
And I'd also say you're probably wondering, well, why the pure heart? Well, I got to be honest with you. I can't tell you how many times I would sit here with some type of a dilemma, and I'm like, okay, it's not about me, it's not about them, it's not about this. Just from a pure heart, what's the best decision for all involved, right? And then that's what I went with. And I also found that when I explained it that way, and I would say, look, I'm coming at this from a pure heart, it seemed to put people at ease. And they knew immediately after hearing me talk about it a couple of times and working with me, they were like, okay, so Shanna's coming at this. She really has my best interest at heart. And that's why I think relationships are so incredibly important, that you build that trust and that respect and that collaboration, so that when you have to have difficult conversations or you have those dilemmas that show up, people know that you're showing up authentically and that you're there to serve, what the greater need is. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, audience, for the wonderful question. Well
Yeah.
answered. Thank you, Shanna, for your presentation, sharing your presentation with WIN conferences. So we look forward to
Thank you.
continue our support for our future conferences as well. So this is Melinda Roy, and if this is a hybrid event, if you want to join and share your thoughts for the physical event as well, so click on the Zoom link and you can even join the physical event which is going in Paris. Thank you and have a wonderful day, Shanna. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye, folks. Take care.
So let's join for the another speaker. Speaker is waiting. So let's join for the another session.